One, I hope you're doing fine. I'm doing fine too. Today, I will be talking about something that I really follow when I write any research article. I basically follow a few techniques to write a research paper. I will be sharing all of them part by part. You need to subscribe to my channel for that. Today, I will be just talking about something that I do before I even start to write my research paper. That means I read. So I'm actually talking about reading, but this reading skill is not a basic reading skill. I'm talking about critical reading skill. So when you want to write something, you need to read the same sort of text or in the same way so that you can emulate the style, tone, format, and you become aware of the genre and then you start writing. So research is today's genre. Now, if you want to become a researcher, this video is for you. You need to develop this critical reading skill, which is far beyond than basic reading skill. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, which I always do. Yes. So my today's topic is to understand, what do critical readers do? So this is the question. What do you think? The critical readers read. And the critical readers read how? So I will be talking about the techniques. Is it important to read a text critically? Yes, if you want to become a critical writer, you need to understand why you need to read a text critically. Because if you aspire to become a poet, you read poetry. If you want to become a fiction writer, you read novels, you read short stories. You just need to understand the genre, right? So research writing is a genre that will ask you to write critically. So from the critical point of view, you need to develop a critical framework to understand the subject matter and to make your readers understand of what you are saying. And that is why you need to read texts, papers, books critically. So the path is really simple. Critical reading leads you to the path of critical thinking. So when you read a text critically, you are actually thinking about it. You are thinking about not just the text, but also about so many things. We are going to talk about that today. And then when you think critically, you can write critically. That means reading is a receptive skill and writing is a productive skill. And reading and writing go hand in hand. So you need to do both. You cannot become a writer without really reading. So you need to develop critical reading skill to become a critical writer or a research-oriented writer. But let's then talk about the basic difference between critical reading and basic reading, because that's what you're probably asking, right? Let's start from the purpose. When you read a text, just basically read a text, what do? You skim, you skip. So you basically read it just to understand the basic concept of the text. Yes, that is the purpose of basic reading. The basic reading helps you to get a basic idea or understanding of the text. But when you read the text critically, you develop your own opinion or you develop a new kind of idea about how a text works. So when you are reading a text critically, you are developing an idea and understanding how the text is actually working, not just understanding the basic concept of the text or what the text is saying, also understanding how the text is working, how the text is meaning something. That is critical reading. So the activity of basic reading is to absorb the text, understand the message, absorb the text, just like, meditating, you're meditating and then you are just reading it, you're understanding it, you are, what can I say, you're just devouring the information of the knowledge. But when you critically read, you analyze, you interpret, and you evaluate a text. So these are all different things. Absorbing and understanding a text requires only to read, but analyzing and interpreting and evaluating a text requires more involvement of a reader. So you have to have a focus. The focus of basic reading is to know what a text says. And the focus of critical reading is to know what a text does and means. So you are actually focusing on the text activity, the text functionality, how the text functions in a particular situation for a particular purpose and on particular audience, right? So when you are reading a text, you're basically asking something, because without the question, you cannot come up with the answer. So the question is, what information can I get out of it? So you read the text with your basic reading skill, and you will know what information you can get out of it. So you're just focusing on the information. And then how are you responding to this question? You're restating the same information. You are just giving the summary. You are coming up with a basic understanding of the text, restating the same information in your own way, but just you're reading the text with it, not against it. So you're believing the facts that the author or the authors provided. But when you read a text or a paper or a book critically, you have these sort of questions, which you can see on the screen. What are the choices made? Maybe by the author or by the source itself. What patterns that result? What kinds of reasoning and evidence are used? Just as I mentioned, that you need to get involved in the text critically, and then you ask questions. You are, becoming skeptical. Skepticism is good. And then you are also asking, what are the underlying assumptions? And how would you like to respond to these questions? By describing the text first, then interpreting it, then evaluating it. So how can you evaluate? If you have developed an idea or your own opinion about the text and how the text functions, then you can interpret and also evaluate the text. That means you are not just reading with the text, you are also reading against it. So this is basically a battle, how you can handle the tide when it is in favor of you or when it is against your body. So critical reading is just like that. So it is doing the same sort of tight sort of thing with your thought process. So you are reading with the text and you are reading against it. That's the beauty of critical reading, and it will help you to become a critical thinker as well. Now let's talk about the strategies. So I'm going to share 6 strategies for critical reading. First of all, when you read a text, you just skim through it, basic reading, and then find the main idea. It is basically the thesis statement, you can say, but you need to find the main idea of the text. And then you analyze ethos. What is ethos? Ethos means the ethical point of view. Is the text written ethically? Because, the whole world, this is the world of content creation and content making. So you will encounter information, you will encounter misinformation, you will encounter ethical text, you will encounter unethical and biased text. So that is why it is important to analyze the ethos of a text. Then you start identifying the evidence. So how can you find out the ethos? Just by looking at and paying attention to the evidence and the supports. So has the author consulted with secondary materials, secondary sources? Has the author brought some sort of evidence to support his or her argument, right? So this is how you identify evidence and support. Look for the sources. And then you account for perspective. It is important to understand the author's position before you start projecting your own thoughts, before you start imposing your own positionality with the text. So start understanding why the author would write this, for whom, right? Then you consider the context. So context is also very important. When you are reading a text form from new critical perspective, sometimes you don't need to pay attention to the context, but critical reading is different. Critical reading is not like New critical reading or practical criticism, it's different. It's research reading. So you have to consider the context, what is outside of the text. And then this is the last strategy, and that is playing the game. It's the believing and undoubting game. That just like the thing that I have mentioned previously, that you are reading with the text and against it. You're believing the argument, you're doubting it. And then you come up with your own opinion or idea and you can evaluate the text. Okay. Now, how would you critically analyze a text? First of all, consider these 4 things: genre, audience, purpose, and situation. Ask this question: what is the text genre? Where was it found? Is it found in a peer-reviewed journal, in a newspaper article, open access blogs, book published by your next door neighbor, or Routledge publication? So you need to understand the text genre. Is it a newspaper article? Is it a scholarly article? Is it a book? So you just need to ask these questions. It is important because every single genre has its own purpose. Every single genre has its own format and also audience. Then you ask, what is the text audience? Who is most likely reading this text and understanding it? It is important because when you read a scholarly article for your own research work, you are reading it because you need that information for your research work. But a research paper is not written for all kinds of audience. It has a target audience. Similarly, a newspaper article, it has a target audience. Similarly, a blog, open access blog, though it is accessible to almost all kinds of audience, but there is a target audience. So ask this question: who is the target audience for this text? Then ask, what is the text purpose? So what is the text trying to prove? Is it trying to persuade the audience, convey information, mislead by being sarcastic? Sometimes the texts are not discreet about the humor, so maybe the text may mislead the audience, right? So ask this question. And finally, what is the text situation? Why was it written? Why does it appear where it does? What exigency does it respond to? That means you're basically asking, so I have found a text on COVID-19. It was published in 2020. That makes sense. It was published on the front page of a newspaper. So we understand the exigency and the importance of the text. It was in the front page of a newspaper, of a leading newspaper, and it responded to the exigency called the pandemic. So we got the situation, right? So we need to understand the text situation. Otherwise, it is very easy to dismiss or, disregard a text and the authors or the, producers or the stakeholders. But it is really, really important to acknowledge all these four things: genre, audience, purpose, and situations. Now, as I said before, that critical reading is not like new critical reading or practical criticism. Those are different things. Maybe I will make another video on those 2 things, or maybe some more theories. But for now, let us talk about what is outside of the text, because new criticism asks you to just focus on the text, only the text, and nothing but the text. But critical reading helps you to understand what is outside of the text. These things are also important. So analyze everything inside and outside of the text. Let's talk about what is outside. Author, publication time, format, structure, citation. So these are the questions that will help you to understand what is outside of the text. Let's ask this question: where was the source found? What is its container? Again, journal, newspaper, article. So you just ask these questions. Who is the author of the text? Do you know anything about them or their previous work? Now you are asking about the author's credibility and authenticity. Now I write columns in the Daily Sun, which is a Bangladeshi English newspaper. So my columns which are available online, you can just click on the name, my name, Jainab Tabassum Banu Sonali there, and it will take you to either my profile or the other articles that I have published in the Daily Sun. That means you can find out my information. But the Wikipedia, for example, can be a very good study material. It can fuel your research work, but it is not a research material, because the author, the editor, and those who are updating the information are untraceable. So it is important to understand the author and their credible positions to write this particular text. What year was the text published? This is also important because sometimes we do research works but take really outdated sources which do not add that much value. If you are working on any historical topic, then I think outdated sources can also add value to it. So archival research, historical research may require outdated sources because those are the sources that you are working on. But it is very important to understand the situation of the topic or the exigency that the text is responding to. So just focus on the published publication information on the date published. Then is it a part of a series? Does the text specifically mention other text or another research that precede it? It simply means that whether the author of that particular text that you are reading is referring to other authors or not. So is the author giving credits to other authors or not? So that means whether the author is writing an ethical paper. So if you're writing a research article, you might know it that you need to give credits to those who are giving you many kinds of information for your research work. This is important. And that is why citation, bibliography, or reference page, or in-text citation, these are also very important to consider. So when you are reading a text for your research purpose, please consider all these things. Though these are outside of the text, these are equally important. Now let's talk about what is inside of the text, that is the context, the content, sorry. The content is, how is the text structured? So you may ask these questions like, are there headings, subheadings, breaks in paragraphs? Is it easy to navigate? You will understand the structure when you pay attention to the genre. Then ask this question, are there only words or are the visuals like pictures, graphs, tables? Because these days we can also see that there are multimodal text. Those are credible text, those are critical text, and you can use them in your research work. So it is important to understand the visual rhetoric also. And then what is the tone of the text? Formal, informal, the combination of both. And if the tone is sarcastic, then you need to understand the cultural context as well, because humors cannot be translated. So if you find out the humor in the text, you need to understand the cultural context. So the content will lead you to the context. Then you ask this question, does the writing include a lot of specified terminology? If it does, then it has a particular audience who might understand the terminologies and the jargon words. If you don't understand, don't just bash the text. Probably it is not for you, but it has a target audience. Now, are there a lot of citation used? Does the text contain a lot of research? Yeah, I mean, when we read research articles, usually they do. I mean, the research articles have many citations, but newspaper columns, probably not. But at the same time, newspaper columns can also be credible sources. So you must understand the genre, right? And then, is the author's stance clear? Is the author biased? And does that impact the text? How do you know that? Is the author biased or not? It is an important question to ask yourself, right? Do you have any bias, an implicit or explicit bias? Now, this is my next point. We might have some sort of problematic bias in everyday reading and writing. So these are the questions that you may ask. What is my racial identity? In what ways does my racial identity affect my behavior or the way I am received in personal interaction? So, your racial identity might be a cause of your implicit bias. For example, I am a brown individual and I'm living in a white dominated state. Sometimes I might look at things or perceive the world from my own racial identity. Then I have to question myself that whether I am biased or not. Then I also have to question my gender identity. Sometimes you will see that some people are really intolerant about the people who are not like them. So difference is not bad, right? So when you can't stand those differences, maybe you need to check your own implicit and problematic biases. You may not know that you are biased towards your own sexual orientation, and that's why you can't stand those who have different opinions about themselves. So this is something you need to understand. Sometimes people say that I am biased towards women because I talk about gender, I write about gender issues a lot. Um, maybe, maybe not. Yeah, I was talking about the bias that you need to understand the bias based on these things. Racial identity, gender identity, your social class, your religious beliefs, your ableism, I mean, from the ableist point of view, and also from the linguistic point of view. And then you start understanding your own self. If you understand your own self as a reader, you may understand um, the biases or the perspectives of the writers, right? So these are the important things. Now, when you see that the author of the text is going against your own beliefs, you need to respond to the text respectfully. And this is another skill. I will be talking about how to respond to a text in my probably next video or another video. But for now, let me just talk about how to respond to a text respectfully. Just try to get rid of your own implicit and explicit biases. Instead of flatly dismissing the arguments that you disagree with, take time to articulate these arguments fairly and acknowledge their potential validity. You can just look at this example. I have also highlighted the phrases that you may use. For example, Jonathan's commentary on the increase in vegetarian dietary choices make a compelling case for reducing meat consumption by tracing the widespread human rights violations in slaughterhouses. However, his arguments around the impact on the environment may be less compelling to some readers. So you're not just, dismissing the idea, you're not disrespecting the idea of that particular writer called Jonathan, but you're just saying that it might be compelling, but might not be compelling for other writers. So you're using transitional words like however, and you are also you're dismissing it, by the way, but you're dismissing it subtly, I mean, respectfully, not, bashing the author or the text itself. But of course, as you can see in the highlighted version, that some ideas do not deserve respect at all. If a text contains racist, sexist, or other discriminatory language or views, or if it presents hate speech, you can treat it as an inappropriate and untrustworthy source. You can just dismiss it right away. So we are not going to conform to any hatred or any hate speech. That is very important for us. For us means for us as researchers. So acknowledge that fact. Now I would request you to start reading and responding to different kinds of text critically. If you want to consult it with me, you can write on my comment section, or you can also email me. My email address is also in the YouTube's about section. And you can also comment on my Facebook because I share my videos there. You can comment on my LinkedIn, whatever you want. But do let me know what you think about critical reading, and definitely do let me know what you want to see more on my YouTube channel. So subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be posting different videos on research writing and professional writing also. And I'm a bilingual writer and a YouTuber, so I post videos on Bangla too. So stay tuned. I hope I'm going to see you very soon.